Okay, everyone, we'll get started. We're running a wee bit late, a few technical hitches, but I think we're good to go. Well, good morning, and you're all very welcome to this morning's event. And I think it's quite timely at the moment. All the talk is around saving energy and being mindful of the energy we use, and we're all concerned about the cost of energy as well. So you're very welcome to this morning. We have a packed schedule, as you can see, so loads and loads of information. So hopefully you'll go off well armed to reduce your energy usage and your energy bills. So just to give you a little idea of the running order, and I should really introduce myself as well. I plough into things as if everybody knows me. My name's Assumpta Kelly, and I'm the coordinator of the North Leitrim Women's Centre, which is Women's Collective Ireland. And we're based here in the Bee Park, and we were delighted to be asked by Nuala and North Leitrim Sustainable Energy Network to co-host this morning's event, which we hope you'll get loads of information from. So I'm going to hand over shortly to Seamus, who'll give you a little bit of an introduction to the North Leitrim Sustainable Energy Network. And then we have a presentation from Aideen McLaughlin. And we also have then Eddie and possibly Nuala, if she makes it back in time, will go through a sample of how to use the home energy kits that you can get from the local library, so you can monitor your energy usage and make informed decisions about how you use your energy. And those kits are available in the local library. So I'll say a little bit more before I introduce Eddie and his box of tricks over there, the big blue shiny box that you can all pick up in the library. So as I said, this morning is really important because we need to be the importance of reducing our energy and being mindful of our energy usage. And I suppose for a couple of reasons. One is the impact on the environment, and we need to watch that. And Aideen's going to talk very passionately about that. And we all know Aideen's the great work that's been done. But also we keep hearing about the impact and the demand and peak times and when to use our energy, and making mindful decisions on when we're using appliances and what appliances actually use the most electricity. And then I suppose the one thing that maybe drove a lot of you to come is the impact on our pockets. So, and I think we're all very concerned, and we're bombarded by information on the news, no matter what station you put on, about energy usage and energy consumption and the rising cost of energy bills. So as I said, it's a very timely morning. So I'm going to hand over now to Seamus, who is the chair of North Leitrim Sustainability Energy Network. And it's an organisation that was set up in 2016. And the group promotes sustainability and developing an energy master plan for the area. So Seamus might tell us a little bit more about that, and researching a community-owned solar farm. So Seamus will tell us a little bit more about the work of the organisation, and then I'll introduce a little bit more about Aideen and what she's going to do. So enjoy the morning, and there'll be plenty of time for Q&A. So if you've got any burning questions, hold on to them, and we will have plenty of time for questions. So Seamus, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks very much for that introduction, Assumpta. Just a very brief few words about the background to our organisation, North Leitrim Sustainable Energy Community. The Sustainable Energy Communities, or SECs as they're known, are a network of community-based organisations promoted by the SEAI, the Sustainable Energy Authority, to try to give control of energy matters to communities. And there are over 500 organisations, I think, now as part of that network nationwide. We were among the first, actually. We were quite early out of the blocks. We're a little bit unusual as an SEC insofar as most organisations are kind of an existing group, be it, it could be a business, a shop, a factory, or a community centre such as the Bee Park, whereas our group, really we don't have any other agenda. We came together as a group of people with an interest in the environment and in sustainability and in energy matters. So this is just what we do. We don't have any other organisation to sort of piggyback on. The incentive, I suppose, or a big part of why we came together was really the anti-fracking campaign, because that was a big campaign to keep out a certain form of fossil fuel energy. But people are asking the question, well, if we don't have fossil fuels, where are we going to get the power? Because people's need for energy is not going to go away, and we're not going to go back to the 19th century or even the 1950s or something like that, when before rural electrification came in. So we decided we'd have to have something that we could be for rather than against. And sustainable energy, obviously, the resources for that are essentially located in the rural areas. And rather than seeing the transition to sustainability as an obstacle or a barrier to people, we said this could be actually an opportunity for rural communities, because we are, after all, the ones who not maybe exactly own, but we certainly manage the resources that give us sustainable energy, such as solar, wind and hydro, in a way that people in the cities can't manage them or control them because population is too dense. So our big idea in coming together was to set up a community energy cooperative where we wouldn't be selling out those resources to speculators and developers, but rather we would be the ones to benefit from those resources in a financial and in a material way. So we became an SEC in 2016, and then we incorporated as a limited company the following year to further our activities. And being an SEC allows you to avail of certain grants and benefits from the SEAI that aren't available to the individual. And one of those was the Energy Master Plan, which is a way of kind of doing a survey of your area and seeing what can be done on a fairly large scale to address energy usage. And the main thing that we did with that was actually to commission a study into the viability of a community-owned solar farm. Now, this is more than just rooftop solar. This would be a big enterprise that would require quite a lot of resources. The study came back quite positive insofar as it was proved even in North Leitrim, where we don't enjoy sunshine all the time, that it could still be a viable enterprise. Of course, it's an expensive undertaking, and we're really just at the very outset of that, but we hope to be developing it in the coming years. We're encouraged by our neighbours in Claremorris down in Mayo, who are a little bit ahead of us, but they have already acquired land for their solar farm, and they hope to be getting it off the ground. So we'll be kind of keeping a close eye on what they're doing and hopefully learning from their activities there. Perhaps when we got the study done, it's already almost 3 years, and the situation wasn't quite as acute, but with the recent rise in energy costs, it should make it all actually more viable rather than less so, and people are becoming of necessity ever more energy aware. However, that's a big project for a little bit down the line. What we're here today about is really to talk about the here and now and what individual people can do in their own homes to cut the costs and to save energy. As Assumpta was saying there, we've come to a time where we all need to take personal responsibility for our energy use now. We have choices. In the old days it was simple. You got your ESB bill in the post and there wasn't really anything you could do about it but grumble and pay it. Now we have choices, and those choices mean we can either be caught out by it or we can actually take advantage of it. And but we need to inform ourselves and to take personal responsibility. So it's not easy because there's information coming from all sides, and a lot of it is from stakeholders who have personal interest in trying to get you to go down their particular route. So what we're trying to do here is give unbiased information. So with that, really, I'll hand over to our colleagues in GEAI, and they will give some very useful and practical household tips on how you can cut the costs. Thank you.
just before Aideen takes the stand, I'll tell a little bit about her. Most of you probably know Aideen from various different hats that she wears. I certainly know her with a couple of hats on. Aideen McLaughlin is CEO of Good Energy Alliance Ireland, which is an environmental NGO focused on climate action, community and youth. And they were very instrumental, and Seamus mentioned it as well, in the campaign against fracking here locally, and raised a lot of awareness around the climate crisis, and they use social media and workshops and ways of doing that. Aideen herself has been a teacher, a businesswoman, a cross-border consultant and an environmental activist, and she's also completely missing off that. She's no stranger to anyone who's involved in community development in North Leitrim or in County Leitrim, and I've sat on many boards and committees with Aideen over the years. So I'm going to hand over to Aideen, and before I do, I'm remiss in mentioning that we also have Mel Galvin here, who's going to talk to us after the break about some of the grants that are available from Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. So that's an interesting one as well. And Mel also knows a lot about looking at the choice and different suppliers who are in the market. So hang around after the coffee break for that as well. There'll be loads of useful information. So Aideen, I'm going to hand over to yourself, and you can introduce your colleagues as well from Good Energies.
Good morning. As Assumpta says, my name is Aideen, and I am heading up Good Energies Alliance Ireland, and that is located in Ballinaglera, in the community hall there. Now, with me are three young European people who are, two of them are volunteers with us through the European Solidarity Corps. This is Alessandro here on my right, your left, and at the back we have Nacho from Spain, and he is looking after the recording of this session. And behind me is Simona. Simona was a volunteer, and she was so fantastic as a volunteer that we offered her a position as development officer for our company. So she's with me to help with the presentation. Now, it's on. Great. This presentation is basically, as it says, talking about household tips and really making it as simple as I can, because really we all have very common problems at the moment, which is how do I reduce the amount of electricity I'm using in my home, reduce my bill and not have such a shock when the bill actually comes. I think that's my phone actually. It just keeps ringing. Apologies. So, start off with then. The first topic that I'm going to deal with is lighting. And I'm not sure how much you can actually read up there. Unfortunately, the screen is very high and it's not as clear as it might be. But anyway, I'll just read what's on it. You've all heard of the different light bulbs that there are, and make sure that in your household you actually do invest in the LED bulbs. It is very important because you save up to 85% of the amount of energy that's used to create lighting and that. You may have a reason to use halogen. That saves 30%, and the new fluorescent bulbs will save 75%. So it is very, very important that you move from what is called the incandescent to the LED or the new technologies there. Another tip is to install dimmers and choose the intensity for each room. In other words, the brighter the light, obviously, the more energy it is using. So make sure that you don't have something lit as if it's Croke Park when actually all you need is a nice romantic kind of ambience. And another tip on this slide is to install motion sensors. If you have a light outside your house, make sure that you also get a sensor so that it's not on all the time. You know, it's common sense, a lot of this stuff. And next slide, please. Now I'm going to give you more tips, which are very, very simple. The first one is only light where you are. Switch off where you are not. And that is so common sense. We're always telling everybody, all our children and grandchildren, some of us, switch off the lights, don't keep them on. But really and truly, I must say I am very remiss at this myself. You know, I go out and say, what? You know, switching off the lights as you go. But make sure that no matter what you're doing, that you are kept safe. In other words, don't switch off the light before you actually get to the next room. Otherwise, you'll be groping around in the dark. Next one. Here's one. Instead of having a really bright light in the centre, have a couple of lights and then just position the lights so that you've adequate light where you are. You know, look at what way you use a room and make sure that if you have a favourite place for reading, that is where you're brightest. You know, get a floor light and shine it there. So you don't need a huge amount of light throughout the room. In other words, light it to suit the way you use it. Next one, use low energy fluorescent bulbs in the office. If some of you may have a home office, and if you're using fluorescent, make sure that it is one of the new ones. It's worth the investment. They use an awful lot less energy. And next, I'm assuming that you are, of course. Simone is fantastic. Use the smart controls to switch lights on. Now, Eddie will be talking about that. In what way can you actually control lights remotely? And that is part of the smart technology that's coming on the market now. And it really is amazing that you don't have to, when you leave the house, you don't have to leave the light on all day for security reasons. You can actually control whether it's switched on or off. And use sensor lights at the doors. I've already talked about that. Okay? Any questions about that? No? Okay. So then we'll go on to electrical appliances. And again, I suspect, no, you're not going to be able to read that. The fridge is the first one. Fridge temperature, don't have it any lower than 4 degrees. You don't need it to be any lower than 4 degrees. Have a look at the controls on your fridge and make sure that they are optimal. To have a fridge temperature of 6 degrees is perfectly okay. You don't have to have it lower than that. And the freezer temperature, don't have it any lower than minus 18 degrees. Again, there is no point, and you're only wasting electricity by having it too cold. Defrost regularly unless you're lucky enough to have a fridge that does automatic defrost. If it doesn't, defrost it regularly, because when it gets frosted up, it's not working as efficiently as it should. Again, you'll be wasting electricity. And obviously, don't put warm food into the fridge. That's very important. You will use up an awful lot of electricity just to get the temperature down, where something can be left for a couple of hours in an oven on top of the cooker or wherever, and then put in the fridge. So that's the fridge. The dishwasher then, wait until you have a full load. There is no reason why you have to use a dishwasher every day if it's only half full. Wait until the dishwasher is full. These are very, very common sense things. And do look at what program you're using when you're using the dishwasher, if you're lucky enough to have one. But in all of them now, there is an eco mode, and that uses water that is not as hot, and it uses less water. So do select the eco mode, especially for normal dishwashing. Obviously, if there is a particular difficult job to be done, then the eco mightn't be as efficient. But for normal dishwashing, there's no reason not to use it. And clean the filter once a month. In other words, make sure that it is working as efficiently as possible. The other thing that, I'll be going into it later, I won't continue with that. And the washing machine then, buy at least Class A appliances. It is worth the extra cost to actually buy an appliance that is not C or D. It really is. If you can do it at all, buy an appliance that is Class A. You know yourselves, I'm sure you've seen the charts at the side of the electrical appliances. They've all got them now, and they go from A to G, I think, you know. A is really the best, and it is definitely worth investing in that. And the other thing is choose low temperature programs. I'll be going into that a little bit later. And select eco mode. In other words, use your appliances. They give you choices to have to use things in the most efficient way. So use the choices that you have. Next slide then. More tips for electric appliances. Watch your kettle. The kettle uses as much electricity as 2 bars of what we used to call the electric fire. Do you remember the old-fashioned ones that you had a 1 kilowatt bar or a 2 kilowatt bar? And at the moment, some kettles actually go up to 1.8 kilowatts. It's incredible. They use an awful lot of electricity, but they are very efficient. So it's a question of weighing up what is the best way for you. But don't boil a full kettle every day. Boil as much water as you need. And have a look at how many times a day do you put on your kettle. I mean, that is the thing. Maybe you are a 4 cups of tea person, or maybe you are a 12 cups of tea person. But certainly it does make a difference, because every time you switch on your kettle, there's a burst of electricity being used. And I discovered that actually we were just looking at the meter, and it was one of those where it goes round and round, you know, and all of a sudden it went round like mad. We said, what's going on? And he said, somebody switched on a kettle. So, you know, just be aware of these things. Don't boil the kettle, leave it for a while, forget about it, whatever, and then have to boil it again to make the same cup of tea, you know. Right, here's another one. Electric showers. They use as much electricity as 4 of those electric heaters, 8 kilowatts. They are notorious. They would be one of the very top electricity users in your home. And really, 5 minutes is enough for a shower for most people. There is no reason, and certainly for young people. They'll have to get used to some of them, I know myself, they'll stay in the shower for a quarter of an hour, 20 minutes, no problem. Don't know what they're doing there, but it's quite remarkable how long they take. And those showers are really, really expensive. So be strict with them. If you have an immersion heater instead of an electric shower, to heat the water, in other words, for a shower, that is another one. We really have to be very, very careful about how much we use these appliances. It's just, I think over the years, certainly when I was young, the whole issue of electricity was very much at the top of the agenda in every household. You did not keep the immersion on, that's for sure. That was a total no-no. And, of course, we didn't have electric showers. But the immersion heater is becoming now. If you have an immersion heater, really, you make sure you have a lagging jacket on your cylinder, and make sure that you have controls on it, that it will automatically switch off after a certain length of time. And there is no reason to use the bath setting unless you are definitely going to have a bath. But these are all kind of common sense things. Now, here's one that people will be quite horrified at. Do you have to wash your clothes so often? I know young people, and I've seen it very much with my own grandchildren. They wear something once and into the clothes basket it goes. And washing, actually, the new fabrics, and an awful lot of them I know are based on the oil industry. You know, polyester, viscose, polyamine, all of those sort of fabrics. Most of our clothes, whether we like it or not, have these, they're the kind of materials that are used. And in fact, they don't like being washed, an awful lot of them. There are two reasons for that. The fabric, if you put them in water that's too hot, the fabric degrades, the colours fade. And the other thing is that they release microfabrics. And our microplastics. And the washing machine is the biggest source of microplastics in your home. So have a look at what you're wearing. There are things that you can buy, sprays to put on clothes to freshen them up. Maybe that's something that you might consider. I know some fragrances people are allergic to, and there's a lot of eco kind of questions about that. But if it is using one of these sprays or putting something in a wash, there is a choice to be made. The other thing too is that if you're wearing thick clothes, you might have spilled something. There is nothing to stop you getting one of these micro fabric cloths and actually doing a kind of a surface job on it, you know. I mean, be sensible. Not everything has to be put in the washing machine and go through a full cycle using all the technology and the electricity that it takes to do that. Look at clothes labels. Make sure you know what fabrics you're dealing with and use the shortest and the coolest settings. Nowadays, clothes washing powders or washing liquids, there's huge technologies behind them. You do not need to wash things at higher temperatures at all, really, unless there's extreme conditions. But really use the temperature that they talk about. Personally, I do all my washing now at 30 degrees. And I'd see no difference whatsoever, it's perfectly fine, because the technology is there. In other words, what's in the fabrics is incredibly more efficient than what was with us even 20, 30 years ago. So it is important to switch, and you're using less electricity that way as well. Here's another one. When cooking or baking, cook twice as much as you need. Some of us are living on our own, some of us are living with just a partner, others have a full household. But if you're cooking for just a couple of you, cook for 4. And then keep the leftovers in the fridge and use it another day. Anything that is cooked can be kept in the fridge very safely for up to a week, no problem at all. So you don't have to eat it the next day. You can eat it in 2 days, 3 days, whatever, and it is perfectly safe. So do make sure that you don't use your cooker any more than you have to, and in particular that you don't use your oven any more than you have to. That's another issue. There is no reason, I have it here actually, that you can roast something at the top of the oven and then bake something at the bottom. Even with what do they call it? It's not when the air is circulating in the fan oven. Yes, thank you. Even with a fan oven, if you here's a tip: if you put a sheet of kitchen foil over whatever it is that's at the bottom, the temperature won't be as high. All right, so you can roast and bake at the same time. So that was the appliances. I'm sure oh yes, there is one that I forgot to mention, tumble dryers. If you have to use them at the cheapest, and now other people will be talking about the controls, in other words, the night rate and the day rate. But don't use tumble dryers during the day. And in fact, don't use tumble dryers at all if you can possibly help it. In the old days, and very much now, there are racks, and the racks are really great that you can put the clothes on. And if you have, as most of us have stoves or in their house now, and if you're using them at night, just put the rack in front of the stove. Things will be dry in the morning. Just plan a little bit more than we have been doing when energy was cheap. Okay, so the next one is transport, which is very different. And I have some tips for car users that I just go down. Tires properly inflated. If you have tires that are soft, you're using up more fuel. Stick to the speed limit. Combine short trips with longer trips. I'll be talking more about that in a minute. The alternatives then look at public transport, cycling, carpooling or car sharing. And other steps, take unnecessary loads off your car. Don't use your car as a store for rubbish over days or weeks, or things that you want, that you say, oh, I have to get rid of that, and you put in the boot of your car, meaning to take it to a recycling or what, and it's there for a number of days. Don't, in other words, don't have as light a load as possible in your car. Shift to higher gears quicker. My battery is running low now. And turn off the engine when stationary. Now, so don't leave the engine running to warm it up before you get into it. With modern cars, they all warm up extremely quickly. So, more tips for transport then. Cut down on small trips. If you want to cut down on fuels, you're cutting down on energy costs. Most kids can walk at least a mile to school. So what are parents doing? Bringing their kids in short trips to school. It's just crazy. And if you feel that the roads aren't safe, well, that is a reason for us to lobby for safe school access. And it is a very valid reason, and it's something that we all should really be very conscious of. That, there should be at least a mile radius right around the school, that all roads should be suitable for walking. And the other thing is, for ourselves, walk to local shops or use a bike, okay? That it's so easy to get into the habit, and I do it myself. You want something, so you get in the car rather than just walking. Try to plan so you don't have to have unnecessary trips to shops like that. Use the public transport. It has improved. It's certainly not perfect. We need to keep lobbying for more public transport so that we have a choice. It is totally ridiculous that still in Leitrim, an awful lot of people really need their car to survive here. I mean, if there's no public transport at all that is accessible to you, you have to have something. You have to have a vehicle, and that's not right at all. And then if you're using the same journey every day, do try to cut down this commuting through carpooling or sharing. And work from home if you can. Now, I'm not saying that 100% working from home is absolutely the answer. There are lots of problems associated with that. But if you have a choice, even part-time or whatever, working from home, of course, cuts down on the amount of fuel that you use and an awful lot of other hassle as well. And consider switching to electric cars. Well, you can see the ads for new cars are all electric now, but we do need more infrastructure in Leitrim, to make it possible to use an electric car, to be confident with it. And the other thing is that we need to, the cost implications are very real, of course, but really we do consider switching. That's all I'll say about that. And the last one is heating then. And are you okay there, Simona? You are. Generate heat via cleaner fuels. If you have an old oil boiler, switch to a condensing boiler. If you're using, if you want to upgrade from an oil boiler, use heat pumps. And of course, you can use solar panels. So generate heat versus via cleaner heats. Now, there will be other people talking about that. I'm not going to talk about that today. The next one is retain the heat with extra insulation, double glazed and thermal curtains. Thermal curtains, there's an interesting one. If you, in the winter time, people used to have summer curtains and winter curtains, and maybe it's time some houses brought back the winter curtains. I think even to put another curtain on top of the one that you have, just to make sure that you keep as much heat in as possible. And the last one, controlling the heat with thermostats and radiator thermostatic valves. Again, that will be dealt with by somebody else. But more tips on heating. Do an audit on your house. You yourself make a note. Do you need draft excluders, better windows, more insulation? What does your house need? Make a plan and then look for advice. Can you get a grant to upgrade the situation in your house? All right, and there are plenty of us here that can actually give you that advice, and you will be, and Mel will be talking about grants later on in the morning. But it is important, that we all have a look at our situation and just see how we can upgrade a little bit. And then one of the things is that, okay, you have an ordinary house that maybe is a little bit old, but you can still control the heating in various parts of it. So you can imagine that your house has zones. So high for your living area, which would include your kitchen or whatever, medium for the bedroom and bathroom, and low for disused rooms. And if you have thermostats in the rooms, and this is something that I would say definitely, if you haven't got, please have a look at. Control temperatures with the thermostats. You don't need to have the same temperature in a bedroom that you're not using as your living room. So turn the temperature right down in those rooms if you have a thermostat in the rooms. If not, look to see if you can install them, because that will lower your temperature, lower your costs. The other thing I wanted to say was that the radiators. Oh yeah, that's a different one. Right, so lower the temperature by 1 degree. A lot of people say that by lowering the temperature by 1 degree, you will save 10, is it more? % of your heating costs. And the other thing is keep the doors closed. There's no point in having a warm room and then having the door open to a cool hall, because obviously, one will affect the other. So again, be careful about these sort of things. And finally, we've got used to, at least it's in a lot of households, we've got used to having the temperature high enough that we can wear T-shirts in the house. That is not necessary, and certainly when I was a young kid, that was unknown that you'd ever have just a T-shirt in the house. Wear warm clothes indoors. Don't turn up the temperature, put on a jumper. And wear thermal underwear. those people that wear thermal underwear swear by them, that it really makes a big difference to your comfort. And don't forget warm socks. Right, that's actually, yeah. Okay, so they're my tips for trying to lower your electricity bill, lower your costs. I am not going to talk about the electricity bill. That is a subject for another day, because there's an awful lot of information on there, and you need to know what some of that information, but there are people here who can help you with that. But now, I just put up this just to remind you that, as well as everything else, prevention of waste, minimization of waste, reuse, recycle, energy recovery, and finally landfill. Really, at this stage, the amount of waste that we generate should be going right down, because there's a lot of things that can be recycled, and especially our food waste can be made into compost. We all know that. Be careful of your waste. It's not directly associated with your energy bill, but it certainly is associated with the general environment, because even though you don't have to deal with the processing of your waste, but it is part of the general costs. Hi. So the message of sustainability, and I'll finish with this, that we're all in this together, and energy costs, whether we like it or not, will be more than before. I don't think we will ever, it would be quite extraordinary if we ever got to a stage where energy was cheap. And maybe that's a good thing, because for sustainability, why should we think it is okay to waste energy? It is a resource like everything else, and we can adapt. We need to plan more, use less, and avoid waste. And if we do, the message is the planet will thank us and our well-being won't suffer. Okay, that's it.
There's some space if anyone has any questions for Aideen.
Can I ask Aideen about the fridge? Is it better to have a full fridge than an empty fridge? And if you were going away, the fridge is obviously empty, apart from a few things. Is that more costly?
With the freezer, it is definitely true that an empty freezer running costs are more than a full freezer running costs. With the fridge, I suspect, Mel, could you answer that question? Have you heard it before?
Yeah, in general, it's better to keep the fridge full. Now, if you're going away, keep the fridge full is more about short changes in what's in there and what's out there. So, if you have the fridge full, when you're using it in general, it maintains a fairly good buffer temperature. If you're emptying it one day and filling it the next, the fridge is working harder a lot. Now, if you're going away for a week, don't go putting food in there that might spoil. But you could just put in bottles of water.
All right.
That's simple. Or bottles of wine they keep as well.
So, another question regarding the energy rating stuff. You do know that that's all those classifications have all actually been changed. Yeah. So if you go, I bought a fridge freezer just recently. I went for the best I could get for the money I had, but it actually only ends up being a D.
Oh my goodness.
And that's a D in the new structure. So an A, what you're calling an A, is actually probably an F or a G. On the newer, so there's a whole new.
Yeah, the European Products Directive has been changing, and the energy labelling of that. So it's similar to the building energy rating for homes. You know, when it was introduced maybe 15 years ago, what would have achieved maybe a D then might be an F now. So it's because the criteria against those nice coloured letters have increased. You know.
How do you know when you're looking at replies for just the normal Joe Soap, you go in, you have a look? How do you know straight away if it's the old criteria or the new criteria? Because they all just say AEs.
Once the new criteria is in place, all products on the market should meet the new criteria.
I'm not asking the question. The question is, how do I know when I look at it visually, if I want to go and buy a washing machine, how do I know if it's the old rating system or the new one? Visually, straight away, what letters are there?
I don't know that unless there's you know a little reference to the new European Products Directive, but nobody's going to go looking for that. Like I say, if you go to a shop now, they've got something on the shelf and it's got an A rating, it should be to the new RIG rating. That's the legal requirement.
Oh, so that's the legal requirement nowadays that all appliances that we're looking at are going to be.
Yes.
That's right. That's a new point.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yes.
Aidan, thanks very much for that. I was wondering about, you know, the what are called air cookers, air
fryers.
Thank you. Air fryers. Do you know if they're more efficient than you turn on your oven?
I'm sorry, I don't. I know I've just seen those on, you know, there's a big thing about them in the social media and all the rest of it and in the papers, but I actually don't know anything about them, so I'm sorry, I can't ask that question. Maybe you can?
I heard something on RT there, where it's only using small amounts.
It's a very small space.
Compared to the big oven, yeah.
In general, it's going to be using less power, so it's about how long you need to use it. So if you can put something in your oven for half an hour and it's using 6 kilowatts, you know, so it's going to use 3 kilowatt hours in half an hour, or you put something in your air fryer but it takes 2 hours, you might be using more energy in the air fryer. Generally speaking, the air fryer is going to be more efficient because, as you say, it's only heating up the food. It's not heating up a big box with a little bit of food.
All right.
Can I ask? Sorry, go ahead.
That locks on to that. You suggested eco program for washing machine, dishwasher. My experience is they take a lot longer than the other ones.
They do,
And that means they take more energy.
not necessarily, no.
More energy.
Most of the energy is in heating the water. So the eco cycles work on a lower temperature, which means that they move the water more often. Yeah, you know, the motor is working harder, but the thermostat that heats the water, the element that heats the water is working less. So in general, they will use less. I used to think that myself, and I tried to get to the bottom of it, and that is the reason. So it's because they use hotter water.
Sorry, can I ask something? Sorry, just thought, what about slow cookers? Are they good?
They run their off very.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Are they better than a...
Well, you see, it depends on what you're doing. If you've something, you know, just think about the amount of power that you're using. If the slow cookers, if you have just one thing in a big oven, and you're cooking it for 2 hours, that'll take up an awful lot more energy than a slow cooker, of course.
Oh, I understand, but just generally, if you were to cook your food in a slow cooker and it cooks for like 5 hours, is that better than using an oven for an hour and a half or whatever?
It's hard to say.
Yeah, isn't it? Yeah.
It's likely to be a little bit better. The other thing is the food is fantastic out of the slow cooker. and fill it up, like,
Not
as Aidan was saying.
yeah.
You know, don't cook it, especially if you're in a slow cooker. Fill it up and you'll have loads of food. And it works on a lower power. So it's a lower power for a longer amount of time, which means it might be less energy than a lot of power for a little amount of time.
Okay,
So
so good bet.
It's
Yeah, but the food is fantastic, so.
I saw it on telly, on an English telly the other day, and they were saying, slow cookers are better than the oven.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, they definitely would be better than having the thing in the oven for an awful long time. Definitely, you know that. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to give you a really good tip in regards to your hot water. If anybody has like a range or a wood burner, buy the old style kettles, the ones you could fill up, and stick it on. Old girl guys thing. Always have the water going, no matter what. Keep topping it up. You boil up your kettle, you top it up with that. You only a couple of minutes boiling your water.
Oh, right. Okay. Fair enough.
I'll give you another tip if you want also. You know, you were saying 30 degrees for the wash.
Yes.
And you don't want to be washing clothes all the time, actually. Well, all the wash machines generally take the mains water directly from the mains into your thermostat and to heat your water. So surely the question is to get the thermostat out of the equation. So if you can draw your water directly from your heating water system, bring your water from the hot water tank.
All right.
Rather than heating the water in the wash machine. And you want to keep the thermostat as well. So if you have two connections going into a wash machine.
Yes.
You have a blue pipe and a red pipe. Blue pipe just it feeds water, and that then heats you put
But how hot is that water? That is the thing.
Well, you see, so long as you know your thermostat on the tank, actually, copper cylinder, you shouldn't be okay.
So it's warmer than the mains
Well,
one.
you might be
But
better.
it would
It'd
be
be too high.
it'd be too high. You see, that's the thing.
Yeah, but you blend them with mains water going into them. You blend the two water systems.
Oh right, yeah.
It's
Oh, I
like-
see what
it's
you
like
mean.
if you make, I know, it's like the same as cooling down a bowl
Yeah.
of soup for a child. You know, you don't give them scalding hot water. You give them
No,
hot water
no,
appropriately.
yeah.
But a lot of the washing machines now only have a single feed.
Oh, I think we don't like
Mine has a
so.
single feed.
Give it double,
Yeah.
that's the way to go.
Some of the older manufacturers used to do a double feed, they'd have a hot and a cold feed, but most manufacturers now have just gone for that because for them it's cheaper make, it's cheaper build. So yeah, that's the issue.
Yeah.
Any other queries? We'll move on with what a very
A
practical
question, sorry,
Yeah,
in
you're
regards to, say you have the light bulbs, you have the energy saver light bulbs, and then you have the LEDs, and then you have
LED.
the diodes. There's another type. How long do they actually last for? Because I know that they said that the energy saver ones that were coming out, I actually monitored one, it didn't even last a year. So sometimes, you know, you're paying big money for a bulb that should last X period of
Yeah.
time. And a lot of the times they actually don't.
I find that too.
Okay, so I'm not the only person that's
Yeah.
been watching that.
They're not lasting as long as
No.
they say they're due.
Yeah, and you pay like
Yeah.
€8-9 for an energy saver one.
years or whatever, but they're not.
No. So I don't know, have anybody else done any studies on this or found it or
There's
just the two of us here?
the diode is the LED. LED is light emitting diode, so
Yeah,
it's the same
sorry,
thing.
LED, there's another one.
CFL.
LEDs are very good now.
LEDs.
LEDs are generally the most energy efficient.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of rubbish. There's
It
a lot
might
of rubbish
simply
in
be the
market.
brand that you buy as well.
So if you are choosing LED, choose a brand, a well-known brand like Philips or something like that, or Osram. The idea that they last, they're given this design life.
Okay,
What that means is that, 95, 96, 97% of the bulbs will last to that design life. There will every now and then be one that doesn't. So you might get a lucky. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened to you. Probably you might have got one that wasn't built, it wasn't made in Europe to CE standards and stuff like that, and it's just chucked out.
what's the standard, so
Okay.
Okay, we'll hear loads more from Mel after the coffee break as well, so hold on to your questions. Thank you very much, Aideen, and I think there was a lot of nodding going on. I think we've all woken up in a cold sweat with our mother's voice in our ear going, did you turn the immersion off? There isn't an Irish household in the country that wasn't traumatised by the immersion. And I have to say, and the whole thing about clothes, I have a teenager who doesn't use a wardrobe and doesn't use a hanger. Everything's thrown on the floor, I tell her to tidy up, and all goes in the washing basket. Even if it could have been clean and ironed and just never made it to the hanger. Although I have to say, I'm very guilty. My car, and anyone who knows me, it's a mobile storage unit. I'm really going to have to fix that when the car is where I keep everything just in case of an emergency. So thanks very much, Aideen. And if people have more questions, there'll be loads of time as well. So I'm going to hand over now to Eddie. He's getting himself set up. Eddie Mitchell is one of the directors of North Leitrim SEC. Eddie will be no stranger to most of you. He's been involved in many community environmental organisations locally, and he's also studied renewable technology at ATU Sligo. He was to have a co-host, and she's hiding down the back, but I'd be very remiss not to introduce, well, I'm not introducing Nuala McNulty, I'm thanking Nuala McNulty. Nuala was the one who pushed for today and did all the organisation, but unfortunately isn't able to take part this morning. But most of you know Nuala. She is a member of North Leitrim SEC as well, and is passionate about sustainability and environmental issues, and a trailblazer, and ahead of her time. She built a passive house 20 years ago. So Nuala will be about, and I'm glad you could join us for the rest of the morning. Eddie, are you ready to? Eddie's going to take us through some practical, a little bit more about what Aideen was talking about how we can actually put some of that information into practice and look at the energy usage in our homes. So Eddie, I'll hand over to you.
Okay, how are you? So I can see that there's a fair bit of expertise in the room, so that makes it a little bit harder. So I suppose what Aideen is really giving us lots of very good advice, but a lot of it is sort of general advice, common sense, and a lot of it when we'd hear it, we say, oh yeah, that makes sense. But so my situation is a little bit different in that I had a notion about 10 or 11 years ago putting up a wind turbine, and of course I put it up and stuck it into an immersion, and it ran for 18 months, and then something happened to it, and I left it until now, until this war started. But the difference back then, a unit of electricity was 7 cents. Now it's 43 cents, 46 cents. So now I'm struggling to get this wind turbine back up, because now it's really important. But what it done for me is it forced me to look at my own electricity, because if you're going to turn off the electricity grid, you really need to understand what's your power demand and how much power you're going to need, and if you're going to have to buy solar panels, or is the windmill going to work, and you don't want to figure it out by being in the dark. So that kind of forced me to do a useful exercise. So I have to try and figure out what size of an inverter I'm going to need in order to manage my own system. But I thought I understood electricity, and I thought I understood my own electricity, but I realised the more people I spoke to that I didn't, so I said, right, I better just do an audit. And you think that you understand something until you measure it, So what I done was I made a list of everything in the house. It was 4 or 5 pages long. I thought we were poor. We have a lot of electrical devices, and of course they're not used all the time. But so this is sort of where, just go on to the next one. So the question is, how much electricity? So there's different types of power. There's sort of fixed demand. You get up in the morning, turn on the kettle, you cook the dinner. You kind of have to do a lot of those things at that time. So that demand, you don't have much control over. You have to meet that. And then there's sort of things that you can manage, like you could manage maybe when you wash, when you put on a dishwasher, when you tumble dry clothes, things like that. And then there's ad hoc demand, stuff that you might want to use a skill saw, or you might want to just use a device for a while, maybe once a month, once a year. So there's different types of demand. But so what I've done is, so there's different. What you need to do is, if you want to meet your own demand, because you could buy stuff and spend money, or you could just look very closely, the same as if you were going shopping. Know the cost of stuff in your house. So how much connection do we have between the price of, how much does it cost to cook the dinner for the year? How much does it cost to have a shower? Like, we all blame the immersion. Is it really the immersion? Actually, it's not. I wanted to build a turbine, stick it in the immersion, because I thought the immersion was costing the electricity bill. But when you measure what the immersion's doing, you realise that's nothing to do with the immersion. The immersion's maybe costing €200 a year. And it's, if you look at your oven, it could be 500 or 600. So you have to. So if you're forced to measure, so you can measure. So we now have the support. We have this toolkit which we look at, let's say, at the break. But really, what that does is it helps you to figure out your electricity use. So there's a little device there that you can literally plug into the wall, and you can see, well, plug in your kettle, and it'll tell you how long. Measure the time and the amount of power that was used. But what you need to do is get your electricity bill and look at the cost of electricity for you. So you'll have all your standing charges, and you haven't much control over that. But you have your basically, you have 3 prices that you pay for electricity. You have night time, daytime, and peak time. So you don't want to be using devices that aren't necessary during peak time, obviously. But we probably do, Or you don't want to use devices that you could use at night if you could use them during the day. And then you might be worried about, well, is there a risk to a dishwasher flooding in the kitchen when I'm in bed? So you have to consider that. So what I've done is, I didn't have this device, but it's a great device. So what I've done is I've just looked at the energy rating on the devices. So the kettle will be maybe 2.5 kilowatt. So if you boil the kettle for 10 minutes, that's a percentage of an hour by the price by the kilowatt use, and you'll find out what the cost of boiling the kettle is. And it's important to figure out how to do that, and you realise it only costs a couple of cents to boil the kettle. But the fact is, you're boiling the kettle all day and all year. I'll go through some of the figures. Now, just before we leave this, so some devices are more complex. So your dishwasher is a complicated device. It runs for an hour, but it only heats water periodically. So for some things, you need to look at maybe. So on my dishwasher, it tells me, see that 258. That's what the kilowatt use for that device is. Okay, so you could say, okay, 258 kilowatt hours a year, which would be costing 43 cents if you were running at daytime, or 22 cents at night time, we'll say. So when you do the calculation, you realise there's about €50 to be saved by just running it at night. So you know that if you decide to run it after 11 o'clock, that you'll save €50 or €60. So that's a saving, you know. And it's money that you're spending maybe that you don't need to spend. So you can, it's useful. So I want to, because I've done this, I want to just show you what. So this is just a little, so. Well, but it's just an Excel sheet, you know. So and anybody who wants to have what I done, I can email it to them. It's a useful model that you can build up of your own energy use. But what you'll notice there is that what I didn't realise. We have 2 fridges in the house. So we've one lovely new fridge that we bought. Everything's in it, and then we have an old fridge that we had, which we still have plugged in the utility room because it's handy to have an overflow fridge. Now that fridge is costing us €400 a year. We didn't know that. We were wondering why we were blaming Dulta for using the immersion, you know, but it wasn't. It was actually, I haven't told him now, but it's actually the fridge. So sometimes you have to analyse. There may be something in your bill that you can see when you look. But you see, you have to really look at your own demand. And when you look at your own demand, I can't get Olivia to get rid of the fridge, but eventually we'll have to change that fridge for a smaller fridge if we want an overflow fridge. But we can't be spending. Well, no, it's an old fridge. It's probably 40 years old, and it's just probably. Now, the thing about it is, if I have this device here now, I can just plug that fridge into it and actually see over a 24-hour period what that fridge is using. So I can do a bit of research and look at the model online and see what it should be using, or else I can actually test. So for.
Sorry, Eddie, how do you plug it in? What way do you take the plug out of the fridge and put it into that?
Yeah.
And then switch that on.
Yeah.
We actually have a little video about that energy kit.
Oh, great.
And we'll be showing it to people at the break.
Yeah. Now, so if you want to ask me a question about a device, I can answer questions. Like, you know, your four ring hob, your electric hob. Like those rings vary from 1200 watts each up to 1.8 for the big one.
The induction's worse as well.
And the induction is worse. So like, very expensive, you know. Like our double oven, I realise now, is 4.6 kilowatt. You know, so like it's costing €500 or €600 to cook the dinner. So all of a sudden you have to ask the question, well, why don't we always wanted to buy a solid fuel cooker, and now all of a sudden the solid fuel cooker makes a lot of sense because power has gone from 22 cents up to 46 cents. Looking at your own, so a lot of people already would have a solid fuel stove, or they might have an air fryer. But when you look at your own power, then you realise maybe it makes sense to buy a different appliance, or to get rid of an appliance, or to make a change. What else was?
Are you saying it's cheaper to cook on one of the smaller rings?
No, it wouldn't. It just means that when you're cooking, it's costing you money. So maybe you could. So it depends now. For me now, if I'm going to get a turbine, maybe I need a gas hob. Do you know what I mean? Or else I need a bigger inverter, or I need a bigger battery, or or I need more solar panels, you know. But it means that there's a huge demand that I wasn't aware of, because the cob was relatively cheap to buy, and the oven was relatively cheap to buy, 15 years ago when we bought it. But the cost is in the running of it. So when you look at your own demand, you need to connect yourself to your own power use in order to be able to really benefit.
Sorry, do you know the comparison between cooking on gas or electric?
Well, I suppose the gas is probably more expensive, but it's just if you had no power, like in a situation where you want to go renewable, you might want to have some other alternatives to electricity.
I'm lucky enough to have arranged, one of these, it's not a solid fuel rig. It's got gas hob and electric oven. And we use the bottled gas, obviously here because we haven't got but we find that really economical actually. A bottle lasts us for months. I'm quite shocked at some of these figures that Eddie is quoting actually, It makes me think that really we need to think about the slow cookers and the air fryers, and Eddie knows by the sound of it. What your oven is consuming is huge, isn't it, Eddie?
Well, my double oven, see those two. So this is a bar chart of some of the devices that I have. So that's the cost per year of running the different devices. So just once you model stuff, then all of a sudden then you can create all this information. It makes it easy. But so my double oven is 450 euros, and that's me not really understanding the double oven. Mel, you might understand them better.
That's the cooker, isn't it? That's the oven, the big one.
The oven, yeah. So it's a 4.5 kilowatts. So I'm not attributing all the 4.5 kilowatts to it. I'm saying there's two ovens, so I'm saying maybe 2.5 kilowatt to the big oven. So it could actually be more, and then it jumps in because we use it every day, But now your lighting is actually, because we now have all of these, more efficient lights. Our lighting costs are really low. I mean, what I want to do now is just give you some more.
You can't expand that a wee bit.
Well, I can tell you what's in it.
Yeah. What we can't see what's at the bottom at all, Eddie. That's the problem. If you could even read out the main ones there, that would be
Yeah,
great.
I'll do that. So, a second.
No, that won't make a difference.
I know I'm doing it for myself now.
Sorry, a question just on say the new induction hobs, like the brand new ones. They should be cheaper in the long run because you can cook your food way quicker,
Yeah.
shorter period of time. There's no messing because as soon as you put the pot down, it's kicking in straight away. You've got straight.
Well, the thing is, you need to do a bit of research and figure it out.
But how did you measure your oven? Because they're all hardwired in to.
So what you can do with a lot of devices is you can look them up online. So you'll find that information when you look them up. So some stuff you can just read the plate. Like I couldn't find the plate for the hob because it's in the counter. But if you look up the hob online, you'll find it's still for sale, and you'll see the energy ratings on it. So some stuff you might have to research. Some stuff is complicated, like computers and stuff like that. You look them up online. Like your Wi-Fi. People say you should turn stuff off. Yes, obviously, if everybody in the country turns off their computers and not have them on standby, it'll take away the need for, a significant generator somewhere. But from your own point of view, it doesn't. What you need to do is look for the device that's affecting, or several devices that's affecting you. So lighting isn't that bad. So if you're running around the house turning off all the lights, but you're not seeing the fridge that I couldn't see, then that's why you need to do a little bit of try to get an understanding of your own demand, and I think it'll definitely be worth your while, because you'll find the gremlin that's putting the bills up, So what I wanted to do, I'll go through this really quickly. So the first thing there was my double oven. So that's at least 450 euros a year. So that begs the question: should we have a solid fuel stove? Because I think you get a fairly good solid fuel stove for 3,000 or 4,000, and you can see the payback now is, you know, for a good oven, for, you know, if you're into cooking, it makes sense now, you know. The fridge.
You're burning. What are you burning?
Well, where I live, I'd be burning timber, so there is no.
But you have to cook that and that uses energy as well.
Yeah, well, I actually have lots of waste timber because I'm a carpenter, so that for me.
You need your saw, you need petrol or diesel or whatever to use your machines to cut it and to split it, and you need space to house it and all that. I mean, everything has advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah, and if you analyse it, you might find that that's 1% of that's a very small additional cost in relation to what can be saved, and that's obviously there's no such thing as there's always going to be something on the other side of the equation, but if you do your own equations for your own situation, you can find that you just save. It's like when we get rid of that fridge, we won't really notice, but we in reality we'll have. Every year we have that fridge is costing us 400 euros. Like we don't have 400 euros to be just have it running in the back kitchen because we like to have 3 or 4 gallons of milk there. You know what I mean? Because we have a busy house, you know. But so that's the stuff that comes. So
Eddie, what was the second highest there?
so the second highest is my fridge that I shouldn't have. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So then my hob is actually, like we were there one day and I was trying to figure out what my energy demand was, and I realised there was 4 rings on and the oven was on and the kettle was boiling, you know, and that's the way we use energy. But that's where the bill is. It's not so much in the lights. Like there's loads of stuff. You've got pumps and septic tanks and everything is draining power all the time. And if you want to try and make a connection between your energy use and your bill, you need to sort of break it down.
It's the big hitters.
And sometimes it's the big hitters, but it may be that something is on all the time that you didn't know, you know.
The fourth is kind of scary.
So the fourth is, so my kettle is there, yeah. I'm very fond of tea. But the kettle, it doesn't cost that much to use, you know, to boil it, to make a cup of tea. But when you look at it over the year, you realise actually it's quite significant, you know. But I'm very fond of tea. I don't know if I could function without tea. So our new fridge is you can see it's much lower, you know. But we shouldn't have 2 fridges, you know. So the immersion is quite significant. So it's around €200.
It's the 6th one over, so it's just after the second fridge. So
Yeah. But now, so that's a sort of a manage. You know, if you don't,
use it that much.
well, you need to have a shower now and again. So if it's an important not to leave it on, but you can see it's €200 a year, and when you look at your model, you can see that that's, you know, on for an hour every day, we'll say, you know. So if it's on for there's no point in fighting with people over it, because the fight might be about €20. You know what I mean? For over the year. So it's important to regulate it. But if you're getting frantic about it, maybe it's peace might be more important, you know. So your dishwasher.
Mouse just to highlight the things there.
No, well, it's not connected. I'm just doing it here.
Okay.
But anybody who wants this, I can share it with them, you know, because it's just a simple model, you know. So I done a calculation just when I was sitting there. We wash our dishes at 10, 11 o'clock at night, and I just changed the peak number, so the unit price that I was multiplying by, and it just saved €50. So when you analyse, you'll find that, okay, if I do, because then you'll have a real understanding. You know what I mean? You'll know that if in my situation, if I make this change, I can save this, and it's just a useful. I thought it was useful. I did it for a different reason, but I was so surprised. You know, I had 4 pages of electrical devices. When you start counting all the lights in the house and all the computers that are on all the time and all the stuff that's happening, and then you realise, okay, well, this is not so bad, but there is one particular thing or two that I could change that makes significant So it's the low-hanging fruit, you know. I don't know, is there anything else useful there?
Could I just ask something? You know the way 11 o'clock till 7, is it?
Yeah.
The cheapest.
So 11, I think it's till, is it 8?
It does depend on your.
It changes with the time. Well, for I've night rate, and it's now 12 till 8, and 12 till 9, and prior to that was 11 till 8. In the summertime.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
I
so
know
it's 12 to 8 now.
And
And is
then
there another kind
there's
of
a
half cheap time?
no, there's this peak time, it's 5 to something.
Yeah, so you have 5 to, I think it's on my bill it's 5 to 7. I'm paying 46 cent, but then all day we're paying 43 cent, and then at night, 22 cent. So like we used to, like 22 cent is still very expensive.
But that does depend on the tariff that you're on and the particular contract that you've got.
Yeah. Now, another thing that I figured out when I started doing the numbers is I said, okay, we're going to put up this turbine. What's the best use for it? So I said, what about if we had an electric car? So what's the cost of running an electric car? So you kind of realise if you're doing 40 or 50,000 miles, you'd be using about 5,000 kilowatt, 5,000 units of electricity a year around that. And that's what my turbine can produce. So if I was using my turbine to charge an electric car, it'd actually save me far more than running the house. Because remember, the house now, the electricity for the house is probably coming off a windmill somewhere else. It's probably renewable anyway. So if the price of running an electric car is actually it's quarter of the price of fossil fuels. The hard part is to buy the electric car, you know. So it makes sense to start looking at your own situation, and then if you were to purchase something, you know, that depending on whether you have money to buy something or not, you know.
Eddie, one thing, I've had the situation that a dishwasher actually went on fire during the night, and we were very lucky. But just to warn about that, you know, certainly, and tumble dryers are another one, you know, where you have an awful lot of heating going on, and I don't approve of tumble dryers anyway. But
So your tumble dryer is actually interesting because it's 4 kilowatt. So to do a wash is around 4 kilowatt. So it's very expensive. If you get into the habit of using the tumble dryer, it's like that fridge. It's going to jump. So even with very small use of a tumble dryer, it's looking like around €200 a year or something like that. But that's like nearly never using it. But if you get into the habit of using it, it's going to have a massive impact on your electricity bill.
But there is a safety issue. I know a lot of people are concerned about leaving wash machines and dishwashers and tumble dryers on when they're not in or when they're in bed, so you need to be mindful of that as well.
washing machine, the house went.
Well, yeah. Well, so when you do your own analysis, or based on what I've done, you're saving €50 a year by having the dishwasher on after 11 o'clock. So if you don't, so that's what you have to decide, whether you're worried about the risk or whether you want to save that.
I think to have that switching on at 12, that actually eliminates an awful lot of people because people don't like to go to bed leaving things on like those on. I think that's really bad, isn't it?
I think most young couples are doing that. All the new appliances, you can program them now. They're programmed to go on it.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
I'm just conscious, folks, here of time.
Yes.
Moving on, so we do have space for general questions and answers at the end of the session as well, so maybe we'll hold off a little bit on the questions, let Eddie get through the presentation onto the energy kit there.
Yeah, so Nuala, we wanted to show the energy kit kind of during the break, was it? It's a very...
Well, I think if we have kind
Show
of
the video.
if we have a working break as well,
A working
people just grab I know we had a 10-minute break, but I'm very conscious that Mel is an actual well of information down there that we really want to hear from in terms of grants and stuff. So if people want to grab a coffee and sit back down, there'll be plenty of time for chat. And we're not going to throw you out at the end either, so you can hang on. I'm conscious that some people might want to get going.
Do you want to go and get a coffee and we can chat about this and we can show the video? So basically this is an energy kit that you can borrow from your local library. Now in the video the woman says it's available in Dublin libraries. What she doesn't say is the first 2 counties to have on. We were the trailblazers. So I picked this up, I booked it and I picked it up in the library Wednesday. And it's a great kit. You're not going to see if I'm showing you the stuff from here, so we'll actually show the video during the break. But Eddie, you probably need to finish, do you?
Well, no, I'm
so
finished.
This thing that Eddie was talking about, this is where you plug in your appliance and you can actually see the kilowatt hours. You can multiply it by whatever unit cost your electricity is. You have the thermometer for your fridge freezer, and I checked mine last night. You have this thermal leak gun. So you basically, Eddie, he was doing
Just point it at
somebody. You check, and there's a light that shows, and it tells you where there's cold air in your house, and you can figure out then there's a gap somewhere in your insulation.
Winter curtains.
Not to be used outdoors.
And a very simple thing, I've had it in my house all along. This shows you the temperature and the relative humidity, so the amount. You have to excuse me, I had an emergency dental appointment this morning, so I could be slobbering. I'm still numb, that's why I wasn't here earlier. This shows you the relative humidity in your house, so the amount of moisture in the air. If it's very high, there's something wrong, you know, there's water in the breast somewhere. Very simple, a key to bleed your radiator. How many people have radiators that only the top half or the bottom half are heating? And Aideen, I was highly amused as I came in. You were talking about clothes. It's the greatest tip ever is the thermal toss. €2 at a sale in Rossendra, and the money went to a community garden. I once lived in Dublin, and next door to me was 3 young women, very fashionable women. And I was in with them one day and said they were leaving the house, they couldn't afford to pay for the heat. One was wearing a belly top to here, so there was nothing but fresh air from here to the top of the slum trousers. The other one was in the vest. This was about February, so they were leaving because they couldn't afford to heat the house. So I come back home and I said to my partner, the women are leaving the house next door because they can't afford the heat. Jesus, if the bottom sells a thermal vest, they could stay there. So I'm not saying don't be a fashion icon. Buy the belly top, put your thermal vest on under or over.
Is the people want you
So,
put the video on?
do you want to give tea or coffee and you can watch the video when it's on? And then do you want to come up and have a look at this or
We'll start. All right, thanks everyone. I'm going to introduce you to Mel Gavin, who's already been giving us loads of information this morning. Mel is a chartered engineer and certified energy manager with over 15 years experience in design and project management on a wide range of private and public projects. And he currently manages the contract research unit at ATU in Sligo, providing outreach, external engagement, and research, development, and innovation support to regional enterprises, communities, and individuals. And he's going to talk to us a little bit more about reducing energy and being mindful of energy usage and some of the grants. Aideen briefly mentioned that there are grants available. When you do look at your home and look after you do your audit on your house, there may be ways that you can get assistance towards insulation and all of those things. So Mel's going to talk to us a little bit about that as well. And I think he's also a bit of an expert on different switching your energy companies and looking at your bill and just becoming more mindful and aware, I suppose, and more informed around making decisions around energy usage. So Mel, I'll hand over to you. And again, there'll be space afterwards for questions as well.
Thanks very much.
No problem.
That's a fair old introduction, and it was very, very flattering. I wrote that myself, and I also cook. Also, the odd time. I do have to say I'm not an expert, never comfortable being described an expert. I learn something new every week, but I should know a good bit because I work at this pretty much every day. So the handouts you just got there, there's a lot of information in there. There's some very useful information to help you track your energy use. And there's 2 booklets I just want to refer you to in it. There's a number of ones in there, but the reduce your use one is one of the more recent ones, which is about energy saving tips. The reduce your use campaign comes across very much as a bit, top heavy, as in telling people what to do. The intention really is to help people save money and stay warm and well in their homes. So it's probably just badly titled. And then there is a booklet in here on the home energy grants that I'm going to be going through. So don't try and remember everything that's up there. A lot of the information is in this. From that and the presentation, you will see that there are no actual grant amounts in there, no euro amounts, because they don't print them in the booklet, because they're always subject to change. But I've made a printout of the relevant ones here. So I'm going to hand these out, ask you to pass them on. Just take one, because all the relevant information is on each side of this. Is that okay? Yeah. And I'll explain that when we get to it. Is it okay? Now, I am talking about the SEI grant schemes. There's a number of them. There's been a lot of publicity around them, some good, some bad. Because of the way they are publicized, a lot of people have the impression that they see something and they think, well, I'm not eligible for that, or I can't afford that, and think that you're out of the picture altogether. So the point I'm going to try to make is there are options. Not all of them are going to suit you, but there are options to get some kind of support for upgrading your home. Okay, so I'll go through those schemes at the moment. The other thing I would say is, while I am talking about grants, I would like you to think as we go through this, what is right for your home, not just to focus on the particular grant. So there's no point getting a grant for something that doesn't suit your home. Okay? So this is SEAI, there's the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. We work for them as mentors on the Sustainable Energy Communities Programme. So we would work with communities like Seamus and Eddie's team here, and working with Nuala and working with Aideen as well. So there's lots of these sustainable energy communities around Ireland at the moment. I think there's nearly 700 at the moment. It is all about reducing the overall use of energy and making it as clean as possible and making it as secure as possible, which is a much bigger issue now, we know, this year. So moving on to actually thinking about a home energy upgrade, the point of this, and some of this is covered in the leaflet, I know you can't see that very well, but most of the energy we use in our homes in Ireland is for heating, for space heating and for water heating. And then there's less energy used on small appliances, on lighting in particular, and on electrical appliances. The thing with electrical appliances, even though it's less energy used, electricity tends to cost us more. So it's still worth looking at, but most of the energy, most of the savings you can make are in heating your home. So that's a picture of where heat is lost from the home. And I'll just read those because you might be able to see them. So in general, about 30% of heat is lost through the roof, maybe 10% through infiltration, which is just drafts and leaks, another 30% through walls, 10% through doors and windows, and 20% through the floors. So the big ones really are the roof and the walls. Depending on how many windows you have in your house as well, the windows might be big as well. So many people will often ask, when we talk about some of these more costly energy upgrades, what's the payback time? You spend thousands doing the upgrade, and then you save a few hundred in a year, so it might take many years to actually economically pay back for that. But the immediate payback is an improvement in comfort. The immediate payback is that you're more comfortable in your home, and you're generally more healthy in your home. So the route really is to assess the home first. Don't start with a solution, start by understanding the problem. So what does your home need? Then SEI used to refer to the fabric first approach. That is to make the home as warm as possible around the walls, the windows, the floors, the ceilings. And that's all the insulation. And then you still need some energy. You still need some energy for heat. You certainly still need some energy for power and lighting. So it's to increase the amount of renewable or clean energy you're using at that stage. So this is some details around the assess stage. If you don't have a building energy rating, that's a good place to start. The building energy ratings have got much more reader friendly in the last couple of years. There used to be an older version which came with a horrible technical advisory report at the back that nobody could understand. Now there's a good step-by-step guide with an indication of costs, not exact figures, but an indication of high, low, and medium costs. And then you're looking at insulating the homes. The two most cost-effective insulations you can invest in are your attic insulation and your wall insulation. Those are the two, the pumped cavity wall insulation. Those are the two most cost-effective investments you can make. I've done them in my house. I did the attic myself because I could. I had to get someone to pump the walls because I don't have that kind of equipment. But both of those made an immediate impact. And then you're looking at adding renewables. So this is your heat pumps. Heat pumps do use electricity, but what they're doing is they're actually using a lot of free energy from the air, if they're air source, or from the ground, if they're ground source. And they're upgrading that energy by using the electricity. So you get a lot of free ambient energy, which is essentially renewable, and you're putting that into your home. And then the other obvious one is solar PV. Solar PV is a good technology. It works very well. It's not necessarily the right solution for your home unless you're there to use it during the day, or unless you can afford the battery as well to save it and use it in the evening. There's three main routes to grant supports from SEI at the moment. The first one here on the left is the free energy upgrades, often known as the Warmer Home Scheme. If you're eligible for that, great, that's the good news. You can apply for that. If you're accepted on it and the works are done, there is no cost to you. Okay? The middle one then is the one-stop shop service. This is the full comprehensive retrofit to at least a building energy rating of B2 or higher, and is you contact one provider and they take you through the whole route from start to finish. It's a very significant investment, but you do get your home to a very valuable, very, very warm, very cheap to run state in one project. If you're not eligible for the free stuff and you can't afford the full B2 retrofit in one go, then you have the individual energy upgrade grants. This is where you can select 1, 2, 3, 4 measures, whatever you think you have the capacity to pay for at this time, and you get some grant support towards those. So I'll go through each one in a moment. At the moment, so on the left here, what we have is a list of different measures that are provided, and then you can see which scheme provides them. Now, obviously, the one-stop shop scheme provides all of these measures, so it's the big one they've been concentrating on this year, and SEI have pretty much spent all their time focusing on getting that up and running. I am hoping they'll make some improvements in some of the others next year, and I do think that'll happen. And then you can see there's less measures available in the other schemes. So the free energy upgrade, so this is the Warmer Home Scheme. You have to be the homeowner, so you cannot be a tenant to avail of this. If you are a tenant, it's up to your landlord to talk to your landlord about perhaps availing of this. Your home, you have to live in the home, and the home must be built before 2006. Okay, so that's the initial starting point on your eligibility. The next one is that you have to be in receipt of one of these social protection payments. Not all of them, just one of them. So the fuel allowance, the one-parent family payment, the family income supplement, the domiciliary care allowance, the job seekers allowance for over 6 months with the child under 7, and the carers allowance and living with the person that's being cared for. Okay, so one of those payments, and if you're the homeowner and the home was built 2006, you're eligible to apply for this scheme. So it's fully funded. No, you don't pay anything. What happens with this scheme is you apply, you have to fill out a form, you need to have the local social protection office stamp and confirm the payment you say you're getting. So they're then confirming your eligibility in terms of social protection. SEI don't do means testing. They take that as read. You fill out some details about your house and you send that in. The next stage is that SEI send out an inspector to your home to determine which measures this scheme can provide to your home. Okay, so you don't really get a choice on that. You don't get a menu. They say what measures available under the scheme would be right for this home. And then if the assessor determines there are some measures that would be right, then you go onto a list, and then that list goes to the contractors who deliver the works. The good news is that it's free. The bad news is there's a considerable waiting time at the moment. So from application to actually getting works done at the moment could be 2 years or more. It's a long, long time. So that's causing a lot of frustration for people. What I would say is if you think you're eligible, make the application anyway. If another option comes up in the meantime that you can take, then take it, but get yourself on the list. It may improve next year. The contractor supply chain is improving, but it's still at the moment, even SEI on their website are saying there's a 2-year waiting list to get works done. Okay? The other thing I would say is, what's happened there? Projector, is it? In any case, if perhaps you're not eligible, you might know somebody, particularly the carers allowance and the disability allowance qualification there. You might know somebody that is eligible, so please let them know about it. Right. I'm not sure if you, oh, there we go. Okay. So the one-stop shop scheme, it's the one that made all the headlines this year for good and bad reasons. A lot of press releases come out before things are ready, and that's what happened. So the one-stop shop scheme was announced, SEI had to run it, they didn't have any one-stop shops registered, so that was the initial frustration. There are now about 13 providers on the one-stop shop list, and they do operate nationally. Some of them operate to specific regions, but most of them operate nationally. So the intention here is that you simply call one of them up and tell them you're interested. The first step is that they'll do initial consultation on the phone or by email, and then they will send out an inspector to do what's called a home energy assessment. That home energy assessment won't be free, so it's up to the provider to charge that. So the costs we're seeing at the moment are between sort of 600, 700, 800, depending on how big or complex the house is. That home energy assessment is grant funded to a total of 350. So you should only ever have to pay the net cost. So if they say it's going to cost 700 euros, 350 euros goes straight to them from the grant, and you pay the net 350. When you do get that home energy assessment, you're still not committed to anything. Obviously, you don't know what it's going to cost you at the moment for the full upgrade. The home energy assessment should include a building energy rating, a heat pump assessment, so an assessment to know if your house is heat pump ready, or if it's not, what it would take to make it heat pump ready, and then a costed list of measures to get you to the B2 target. So if it's got wall insulation, what the cost of that is. If it's windows and doors, what the cost of that is. If it's a heat pump, what the cost of that is. And then against each of those measures, which grant funding or how much grant is available to go against that cost. And then after that, what is your net cost after the grant? Again, you're not committed to anything at that stage. What you have is a fairly valuable report. You can hold on to it. You could go to another provider and see if they can give you better costs. The grants will stay the same. Or if you're in the position to go ahead, then you sign up and you go ahead with that contract and they arrange the works and get it done. Again, you shouldn't only ever have to pay the net cost. You should never have to pay the total. That's the way the scheme works. That's the way SEI administers the scheme. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, now, as I said, that's a significant investment for anyone, no matter how big or small your house is. We are talking multiple thousands. If it's a very big house, you're talking, you know, you'll have seen the headlines, 70,000, 60,000, something like that, as the total cost. And then after grant, it might still be 40,000. It could still be 30,000. So it's still a very big investment. It does get your home to a very comfortable space, a very efficient, a very sustainable state, and a very valuable state as well. Okay, so if you're not eligible for the free stuff and you can't make the investment in a single project to get to B2, you can still avail of the individual energy upgrades. The good news here is that the grant amounts against each of the measures are exactly the same as the grant amounts against the measures in the one-stop shop route. The bad news is there aren't as many measures supported in this scheme. Okay, so you'll see that from the sheet I've given you. On one side, there's a bigger table, that's the one-stop shop side, and you can see the grant amounts against each measure. They're fixed cash grant amounts against each measure. And then on the other side, you'll see the list has got smaller. So it's the same grant amounts against each measure, but there's less measures. So for instance, the individual route doesn't do doors and windows. It doesn't do floor insulation. It doesn't have mechanical ventilation. So it's not as comprehensive, but still, if you're looking to do something in your home, and even if it's as simple as getting the attic and the walls pumped, then this is the way to go. And if it's something that you have the capacity to afford right now. Okay. One thing I will say about getting your walls done. If you're getting a quotation to get the walls pumped, that's the cavity pump. So like I say, it's very cost effective, and there is quite a generous grant against it. At the same time, do ask your supplier, your contractor, for a quote for external wall insulation. It's going to be more expensive, but the grant amount is more. Okay, and it's just worth considering. The reason I say that is, at the moment, if you get a grant for cavity wall insulation, you may not get a further grant for external wall insulation or internal wall insulation in the future. You may not. I hate to be as vague, but that's as vague as it is. So it's probably time for a few questions on this. Yeah.
I'm only just in.
How are you?
I live in Drumhead.
Okay.
And we had gone with another guy that come and we were going to do insulation and blah, blah, blah. And then I was off with the mighty Northern Women's Group off up to Dublin, and lassie on the bus.
Okay.
A great friend of our wonderful Evelyn Wynne. Her name is Bernie Christie. She works with Leitrim Warm.
Oh yeah, I know Bernie.
And guess what? Because I said I didn't like the sound of enough of the other stuff he was fly by night. We, you know, the first of the three.
Yeah.
We're not eligible for free, and nor do I expect to be. But I love it, but you know.
Yeah, wouldn't we all?
However, what we are eligible for is to get our roof and our walls for, I think it's round about €1,000.
Yeah.
And I went on to my husband who was in Norway. I said, how long? 2 years. We had a man from Leitrim Warmer Homes, based from Shamrock. He came down and assessed the area. Now what he was assessing for was the roof and the walls.
Yeah.
75 euros. And even that, if we go ahead with it, which we're definitely that 75 euros is enveloped in the price of approximately €1,000. I wish I had the bloody leaflet.
Well, that is the individual grant routes I was just talking about, because the attic insulation and the cavity wall insulation, they were increased. The grant amounts were increased this year. They were increased so much that they were intended to cover the cost of approximately 80% of the works for a typical home. But in a lot of homes, and with contractors who are used to doing it, like Leitrim Warmer Homes, they can do it very cost effectively. So that investment, you're going to be glad you made that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm in number 3.
You are. It's worth bringing up that a lot of the companies that call themselves warmer homes, they call themselves warmer homes because they do work in the warmer home scheme, and they might have started that way, but many of them work in the other schemes as well. So don't not call them just because you think you're not eligible for warmer homes. Yeah.
It's definitely a fantastic.
I've worked with them plenty, yeah.
Local facility.
They'll point everyone in the right direction.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
You don't hear.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Oh, hi, Mel. You mentioned 2006. Was that the if your house was
For
built
the Warmer Home Scheme, 2006, pre-2006.
It's only pre-town.
Yeah.
All right. And just could I ask you about a boiler? I have my house was built in 2006, so it wouldn't apply at all then.
If it was built and occupied in 2006,
Yeah.
it may apply. So they judge it by your meter number, your MPRN number. So the date on which the electrical connection was made by ESB Networks is essentially the defined date of when it was occupied.
You'd find that on your meter, I suppose, would you?
I don't think you'll find it, but if you submit your MPRN to them, they'll tell you.
Yeah. And just in relation to the heat pumps, so I have oil at the moment, and I'm probably be looking at replacing my boiler. What options do I have?
Yeah.
In terms of, do I have any option at all of discontinuing oil, or what would be the implications there?
Yeah, you do have options. So your house is built 2006, so it's going to be in reasonable shape, but it might not be heat pump ready. So if you decide on a heat pump, the first thing you need to do is get a technical assessment. They cost about €600. If you do go ahead with that, if you do go ahead with the heat pump and get the heat pump grant, you'll get an additional €200 back against that heat pump assessment. So the heat pump assessor will come and have a look at the house, and he'll do essentially a building energy rating, but with a particular focus on heat loss. And he has to come up with this magic figure called a heat loss indicator. If it's lower than 2, your house is heat pump ready, and you can go ahead and put in a heat pump. If it's higher than 2, he or she is going to set out the measures required to get it lower. And then you'd have to invest in those, which may be grant funded as well, to get it up to a heat pump. For you, that's still going to be a significant investment. The heat pump itself could be €12,000. With some of the other works on there, it could be a lot. And then you look at whatever grant is available, which will offset that. There's still going to be a good few thousand you're looking at. The thing for yourself is like, your oil boiler is getting old. Is it getting knackered? Like, is it playing up?
It looks a bit knackered, yeah.
So your choice at the moment would be to spend, maybe $2,000 on a new oil boiler. But you're locking yourself into oil again for another 15 years. And nobody knows what's going to happen with oil. It's not likely to come down much in price. It might stabilise a little, but not anytime soon. But it's always going to be going up. If it doesn't go up by the market, it'll go up by policy with the carbon tax. It's going to go up. So, it's locking yourself into that. If you're in dire straits, don't be cold. Do whatever you need to stay warm. So if it's that short-term payout, get the oil boiler. You're going to get a more efficient oil boiler. You're going to be using less oil. And then maybe in 5 years' time, okay, you haven't got the full life out of your oil boiler, but then maybe you can afford the heat pump. I would consider looking at the heat pump right now. Yeah. Do you have a building energy rating on the house?
Yeah, I think it was C1.
Okay, you could.
But I wouldn't mind trying to
bring
it up to B2 or B1.
Well, you could well be heat pump ready. The other option is at C1. You could approach one of the one-stop shops, and if you get to B2, you're going to get to higher than B2 if you go that route, because you're already at C1. You're going to get up to about A3 or something like that. You'll be fairly attractive to the one-stop shop contractors because you're at C1, and there's some additional launch bonuses, as they're called at the moment. There's an additional €2,000 on the one-stop shop route to get to B2 or better with a heat pump. So that's a little bit of additional work in there as well. That might be your best route. The one-stop shops at the moment are inundated, but try everyone on the list and see what you can do. Also talk to Leitrim Warmer Homes, because while they're not yet a one-stop shop, they might be one in the future, and they're likely to be working for one of the one-stop shops. So it would be well worth looking at.
I just have a question there, man. If you avail of some of these grants and the work is carried out and so on, is there a specific criteria that a standard that your house has to reach, and if it fails to reach that, is there a danger that you won't get the grant?
There's always risk. There is always risk. Any of the contractors who work through the grant schemes, they have to be registered with SEAI. Now, that's not very onerous. The one-stop shop is quite onerous. They have to meet quite a lot of criteria. But if you go through someone else who's just SEI registered, yeah, they have to meet a technical standard called SR 54, I think. which sets out criteria they have to meet to do the work. So it's a work standard. It's a quality standard. It should be done to that. We all know that doesn't always happen. In general, it is a judgment call for yourself. I've found most contractors I've dealt with, once they're communicating with me, I'm usually comfortable with them. I usually have more confidence with them. So if you find you don't understand what they're telling you, or you're not happy with the communication, then I'll either tell them that or find someone else. SEI do inspections on some of the work. They obviously can't inspect all the work. If you've had the work done and the contractor has signed it off, the onus should not be on you about receiving the grant. So you should be eligible for the grant under the individual route. Under the one-stop shop route, it's not your responsibility at all. It's entirely down to the one-stop shop. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm just thinking about getting the solar hot water and the solar PV on the roof. But I have no idea what I would need and how much panels I'd need. I'm just curious about the batteries as well, whether I hear they're very expensive and whether you really need them.
Well, there's two different solutions you're looking at there. So, as I was saying at the start, I prefer to start with the problem. Do you use a lot of hot water? If we look at the solar hot water first.
No, because we have a wood burning stove, so that provides most of the hot water, but it's just in summer.
Okay.
We wouldn't have the stove on, we put the kettle on, which obviously uses a lot of energy.
Okay. The solar thermal, again, the technology works, but not everyone has a clear picture on what the technology means. It has a refrigerant in there, and that picks up solar energy and it transfers it to your water tank. It's never going to meet all of your heating needs. So you will always need something else to supplement it, whether it's the immersion or your oil boiler or whatever going through there. The thing is that it has more moving parts than solar PV, the solar electricity. So it's got a pump. The pump needs changing every now and then or can break down. And the refrigerant itself does need to be changed every few years, and nobody really talks about that. So a lot of the solar thermal systems have fallen out of favour. Well, I shouldn't say that. They do work, but I just know many people who've had them and they don't work after a few years and they can't get anyone to do the refrigerant replacement or to get a new pump or to fix something. So they're problematic, I suppose is the honest way of putting it with solar thermal. With solar PV, it produces its electricity, during the day. So it starts as soon as the sun rises, and then it peaks around midday, and then it stops as soon as the sun sets. It works fine, but if you're not there to use the electricity, you're going to spill it to the grid. And you will get a tariff for that, but it's nothing like what you're paying for electricity. The other option is to add a battery, but what you're doing then is you're increasing your overall cost of your system. And it still may not make sense. So with solar PV, you kind of have to go through the figures. If you do, my details will be shared, will they? Yeah. If you do get a quotation for solar PV, you can give me a call and I'll run a quick analysis on it. A lot of people with solar PV talk about payback. And for domestic systems, we're seeing paybacks somewhere in the region of 7 to 12 years, depending on how much it's costing you to start with and depending on how much you spill to the grid. The more you use yourself, the quicker it's going to pay back. Absolutely.
Well, we'd be there in the day anyway.
Well, then if you're mindful as well that if the sun is shining, you don't need an app to tell you. If the sun is shining, you know it's generating. Use your electricity then. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We'd use it mostly in the day anyway.
Yeah. A quick calculation you can do is if you get a quote. Let's say you get a quote of €8,000 for the system. They should be able to tell you how many kilowatt hours that will give you in a year, right? So you multiply your kilowatts per year by 20 years. Give it a lifetime of 20 years. It's going to have a lifetime at least that. Then you divide your total cost by your total kilowatt hours, and then you have what's called a levelized cost of electricity in euros per kilowatt hour. So that hopefully will be less than you're paying right now, otherwise it's just not worth getting it. And hopefully it will be less than the export tariff, which depends on your supplier, is at the moment somewhere between sort of 14 cents and 17 cents per kilowatt hour. So then at least if you are spilling, it's still, your investment is still making you money.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Actually, maybe this is more a question for an installer. If you have thermal solar, and I don't know what the lifespan of that is.
If the refrigerator is replaced and the pump is serviced, it's
Well, neither have been done in my house, and they're still going strong
Okay.
after 17 years because I can't get anyone to do the work.
right.
So I'm wondering if and when I would have to swap that for PV plates. Does the same tank work?
Well,
It's a bit of a technical question. Maybe it's for the installers and the system.
Well, your PV is giving you electricity, so it's not necessarily. You can divert it.
Of course, that's the water tank. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I should have said that. The
Yeah.
other option besides the battery, so if you're producing electricity off your solar panels during the day, and you're not using it, you can spill it to the grid. You can put it in a battery, or you can put it to a hot water immersion. You can divert it. That's quite a cost-effective measure. Especially for that scenario in the summer where you're not doing any other heat to heat the water. It will put solar energy into the water. So you can do that. You can. It's still not as cost effective for you as using it as electricity, but it's better than spilling it to the grid generally.
Sorry, I'll start again. I recently did up my own house. I didn't put the solar panels up, but I actually bought the tank, the big, huge, says 205 litre stand-up tank and stuff. Has the technology now moved on beyond those tanks, the stainless steel ones that would take the solar power energy from the roof down into the tank? Is that tank still useful now, or do I have to dump it? And is that same tank, can I use it for?
You can use it for solar thermal.
Okay.
That's what those tanks are intended for. So it's a tall tank with 2 coils in it.
Yes.
Yeah. So the solar thermal, if I remember rightly, does it go to the top or the bottom? I can't remember. It goes to one of those, and then your standard heating goes to the other.
So my tank is still valid as it is?
It should be. When you go to a supplier, they might say, no, sorry, we're not working with that tank. So if you could go back to your original supplier and see if they're doing solar thermal, then that's your best.
The original supplier was myself.
Okay.
A slight problem.
Anytime you're contacting a supplier, send them a photo of it. If you have a spec for it, send them that and ask them can they integrate their solar thermal system with that tank.
All right, thanks.
Hi, how are you getting on? If my house was pumped back in 2011, and a BR certificate is only good for 10 years, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if I want to go through this, it's back to the start again, isn't it? Would I get a grant in for doing the house if it's out of its birth certificate? I have to get a birth certificate generated before you do any work on the house anyway.
You don't have to get it done before now. You have to get it done afterwards. So after you've availed of any of the individual energy upgrades, you do have to get a new birth cert to get your grants.
Because at the time, I actually forget the company who done it actually over 10 years ago now. But he went to Australia, the guy that was doing it. But he said something to me at the time that he was doing it in November. And he said the optimum time to pump a house or do all that work, because you're pumping in a polystyrene bead or platinum polystyrene bead into the house. The optimum time is the summertime because it flowed better in the pipes from his truck actually. Can you give any indication of that? Like if you wouldn't do it on a -4 degrees outside actually, because it's very coagulated in the truck actually. There's an optimum time to put it into the house.
Yeah, the beads in the truck are supposed to be mixed with a little bonding agent, so that then when you in the future maybe change a window, all the beads just don't come running out of the cavity. They're supposed to stay relatively together. Obviously, in colder temperatures, that's going to get thicker. That's going to get more viscous. So for him, it just means it's easier. It's easier for him to confirm full coverage in the summer. But the way the method by which they do it is it's intended to essentially provide some confidence in that anyway. So as they're pumping, they should be observing in the next hole up that the level is coming up. And that's why, you have the series of holes. So, the intention is that by the time you get to the top, yes, you should have full coverage.
Yeah, okay.
But it's their responsibility, not the weather's. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, yeah.
I just caught the end of Eamon Ryan's interview with Claire Byrne yesterday.
I'm sick of apologising for Eamon Ryan.
Oh, well, you needn't be bothered. I'll tell you, oh, never mind. So, anyhow, he was asked, or Claire Byrne forwarded a question, and it was about farmers and people developing their own generators and all that. And he was asked, what do you think of that? So he said, oh, he wouldn't advise it, that he would definitely say go down the solar panel route. And then I was listening to you talking about batteries and all sorts of other stuff. And I said, and I also saw, I'm not sure, was it Ear to the Ground or another programme, and this guy had developed a solar farm. He had a windmill first of all, and then he had acres of these solar panels, and they were lying diagonally, horizontal. And then somebody said, oh, you can put them straight up and get cattle through them, but as it is, sheep and all this. So I was thinking of me buddy Holly's, thinking of you, Eddie, as I often do. All these Mitchells stick together. And I said to myself, what's going on here? And solar panels, and you often hear, oh, this company, I remember it was the beads versus the foam, and this fella said, oh, you wouldn't get the grants initially. Now, I know things have changed a lot, improved a lot, in inverted commas, since the, was it a budget or, at this stage, I don't know. It's all coming at me. I couldn't tell you what's happening. But he was also asked about, do you know the way you said about the grid, that you can have yourselves, your panels, and you can sell back to the grid? And this person said, oh, that was supposed to happen last February. April, June, July and October. And then Eamon Ryan said it happened in the summer. And you're after nodding. Are you...
No, I'm following your
Oh,
your
well,
the
good
history
luck
of
to
what
you,
you're
because
talking
I'd
about.
say nobody else can.
I
think
know,
it was
I
you
would say-
said, do you know what she said to me? And isn't it very hurtful? You're the best woman for starting half a story and going off to another half. And so you must be used to them windmills that is able to keep up with me. So he was saying, oh, yes, you get this money back and all that. And I don't think myself that it's the electricity. It's these bloody, the administration. There's a word for it, with the ESB and all these companies on your bill.
Yeah.
You pay, what's that now? Fantastic. Well done. Keep up with the programme. Well done. So anyhow, does that impact when Bucky Hoy does eventually pay in?
Yeah, all of that impacts. And, when I said I'm sick of apologising for Eamon Ryan, the reason I have to apologise for Eamon Ryan at all is because of press releases and because of how the media treats his message. I agree with a lot of his messages. I agree with most of his messages. Some of the practice in which it's done, I think, could be done better, but that's just me, and that's not a qualified opinion. I'm not a politician. The microgeneration support scheme is the one that's being referred to there. That was launched again before the press release was released before the scheme was ready to launch. So that made it open to media scrutiny, and media loves to scrutinise things. And they also love to put somebody from the Green Party against somebody like Michael Fitzmaurice, continually button heads and let them at it, and the message is always entirely lost in there. That's why I'm sort of sick of apologising for them. But in relation to the microgen support scheme, For domestic and for small business, anything below like a 50 kilowatt system, there is a payment for export. The payment has to be paid by your electricity supplier. So again, that was agreed, it was ratified as a legal requirement earlier on this year, I think in February, I think somewhere from there. So it became a legal requirement then. In practice, it was quite difficult for the electricity suppliers to administer that at that stage. I'm not forgiving them, but that's the reality. There's two sides to that. One is perhaps some of their own fault. I can't say for sure, but some is certainly to do with what happened in Ukraine and then the volatility in the electricity market. So the prices went sky high. They just didn't know how much to offer people for that export tariff. They really didn't. They hadn't a clue exactly how to price that. Now, most of the suppliers now are starting, but they're going to have to backdate their payment to, I think, February. So if you're with a supplier and you qualify for the tariff and you've been exporting electricity, they're going to have to back pay you to whatever date it became a legal requirement. So it didn't happen perfectly, but it is happening. Does that answer your question?
So they haven't started actually on the payments, because I know that he brought up that the 31st of October was his absolute cut-off point, should be happening. That deadline, he's a habit of missing deadlines all the time. God love him, yeah, he's in charge. Strange.
Selling electricity to the
Some
grid.
some are now. So it depends on which supplier you're with.
Paid.
Yeah.
You won't have, I think, as far as I'm aware, Energy came into the market. Energy actually came in, was it yesterday or the day before, said we're going to now start paying. They're advertising that they're going to pay. That's Energy. I think I heard it this morning maybe, or yesterday.
Yeah, it's they
I don't know if electricity is doing it. I don't know how the other suppliers, what way it is, but all of them should be.
They're all legal requirements. So to meet their legal requirements, they have to back pay.
So they'll have to go retrospectively back, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, sound. It's a pity that Eamon Ryan, the minister, didn't say that yesterday, and he mightn't have been appeared to have been caught short.
Like I say,
Don't apologise.
I'm not apologising for Eamon Ryan. I agree with Eamon Ryan. I'm apologising for the media. It's cheap media at the moment, unfortunately. Sound bites, radio interviews. You know, Michael Fitzmaurice is representing his constituents. And they put him up there against somebody who does not understand that constituent, and they let them butt heads and they don't intervene. And it's a mess, but it makes great radio. And that's what we get. So we all get the message that the Greens don't know what they're at, you know.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I'm sorry to. I just it's going back, and it's just something I didn't get, and it's a completely different topic. You mentioned diverting water heated by solar panels.
Yeah.
To what?
No, if you've got solar panels for electricity, PV.
Oh, sorry,
yeah?
not for water.
Not for water.
Oh,
but
okay.
When it's generating electricity, the best thing you can do is use it as electricity. But if you're not, that electricity can go to your immersion. So you can put a diverter in that knows if your house isn't using electricity, it'll divert it to your immersion tank. So at least you'll get hot water from it.
Okay, and that's something that you can install yourself.
No, well, your solar PV installer will do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And it's usually quite a cheap part of the system.
Thanks for all the information. Thank you.
Yeah, we're past 1 o'clock here, folks. So unless there's a burning question in relation really to your own energy situation, I think we'll move on and just wrap up the meeting. I have a few thank yous to say, but.
And also maybe just to say, if somebody does have a burning question or doesn't remember the stuff, we're recording this and we'll send it out, I suppose maybe via the Women's Centre Facebook page, and yeah, and then if you're not on Facebook, good for you, but give maybe the Women's Centre a ring, because we didn't take names and addresses with all that GDPR business. But we get it to you. We get it to you.
last question then.
In relation to generating excess energy from your houses, I was at the EirGrid roadshow in Sligo Pracotel about maybe 3 or 4 months ago now at this stage. I'm sure I heard someone saying that if depending where you're on the node or where you're on the node for the electrical supply when you're giving back, if you're further away or inefficiently further from the main hub or the main node to get back onto the system, the electrical system, that you can have a fall off in efficiency. So like if you're supplying back, if you're we'll say secluded from the node, does that have an effect on what you get paid, or do you get paid from where it leaves the meter, or is it actually where they get it, they receive it?
For domestic systems, from where it leaves the meter. That's it. That's more in relation to larger schemes that like what Seamus and Eddie were talking about in terms of, let's say, a community-owned scheme. If it's far away from the node, you have to pay a lot for the connection. But that's more to do with the larger generation schemes.
Okay. I'll just close the meeting then, really, with a few thank yous, particularly to Assumpta and the Women's Centre for hosting the meeting here, and also the Men's Group and the B Park Centre, to our friends and colleagues in GEAI. Brilliant presentation, they're very practical, and Mel, of course, from CRU, who kind of jumped in at the last minute. They're a very busy organisation there, so he's actually the third the third one that we had lined up. Thanks to our own members in North Leitrim SEC as well, particularly Eddie for his presentation, and Paul, who did the techie setup for us early, and a very special thank you to Nuala, who really did a huge amount of work to pull this event together and coordinate everything and everybody, and appeared in person as well, in spite of all her other obligations and commitments. So, and finally, a thanks to yourselves for coming out. I hope you've learned something useful today, and it's probably only the start of a journey for you. As I said, you know, the onus is on us all now to be informed and to be responsible for our own energy usage. We can't just sit back and let it happen to us, but being informed is the first step of the road, I think, and there is help available if you come up across, you know, particular situations. And, you know, it's important to remember as well, this is not a one-size-fits-all solution, so it really depends on your own situation, your own house, your own usage of it. So bear that in mind as well when you're calculating what you're going to do and what your particular solutions are going to be. So thanks again. We'll wrap the meeting up there.